Hashtag PodRevDay. That's PODREVDAY.
Hi, this is Flavia Marfella. I host Small Talks at Midnight.
Hi, my name's Ali Pitts, and I host the Roos Files Unite movie podcast.
Hey, this is Garrett Godfrey with the Good Patron podcast.
Hashtag PodRevDay.
Our challenge to you right now is to think about your favorite podcast, why you love them, and what you want to say in your review or reviews. Then, write them, share them, and follow the rest.
Podcast Review Day, celebrated on the 8th day of every month.
We get to thank the podcasters that make the shows we love by posting reviews.
We get to spread the word by sharing those reviews on social media.
We get to discover new shows by following
Hashtag PodRevDay
on social media and seeing the reviews that other folks are sharing.
Hashtag PodRevDay. That's PODREVDAY.
Because podcasters deserve to hear it.
Tatiana, hear me.
Скажи мне, американец, в чем сила?
А вы что, собираетесь на ней жениться?
Да.
Ух, красота-то какая! Лепота!
Таможня дает добро!
И вообще не называй меня, пожалуйста, Вероникой. Кто я? Вот кто я?
Отныне русская земля единый быть!
Don't torture me, I can't live without him.
Hi, my name's Ali, and this is the Roos Files Unite podcast, where we watch Russian films and films with a Russian connection. As always, I am joined by a guest, and today, once again, I am joined by Lyn Seren. Hi, Lyn.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on the show again.
You're welcome. I'm sad that I can't be there in person, but here I am, like everyone else, moaning about it in quarantine.
Yes, indeed. Long-time listeners may have picked this up from the comments we have made and a slight difference in the sound quality. But yeah, normally when Lyn's on the show, we record this thing in person. Anyway, so for listeners who haven't heard an episode that you're on before, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Lyn?
I could try.
You could.
I'm completely lost. I've run out of interesting things about myself.
Your standard response is, I'm Lyn and I don't know anything about Russian films.
That's true. I don't know much about Russian films. I've seen a few now with you, though, which is good.
Yeah.
Yep, that's about it.
Okay.
I'm going to guess that this is going to be better than Anna. That's my comment and callback to previous episodes.
Yeah, that is quite a low bar.
It's nice to feel reasonably certain about something.
Yes, in these uncertain times. I mean, I'm actually not planning on releasing this for a little while, so hopefully by the time this thing comes out, the whole social isolation and just being at home the whole time will just be a very unpleasant memory. But
that would be nice.
Who knows? Let's try and be optimistic, shall we? So anyway, yes, Anna was the last time you were actually on, I think.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it did make a bit of a change in terms of what I normally have you on. It's normally like Tarkovsky or someone similarly like highly regarded, but we decided to slum it for that one.
We did. We slummed it for the full cinematic experience of, paying to see a disappointing film.
Really, really big.
Really big. It was bigger. It was much bigger than our televisions.
Yes. Oh, tell you what, harking back to previous Lyn-isode, I would love to have seen Letter Never Sent on the big screen.
Oh yeah, that would have been great.
Because I know we were slightly like, ho-hum about the story, but the visuals on that thing were just, it was absolutely gorgeous to look at. So I would love to see that on the big screen. But anyway, the film we're watching today is called Malchik Ruski, which literally would translate as Russian boy, or literally boy Russian, because they can do that thing where you switch the adjective and the noun around, but you won't find it listed anywhere as that, as the English title is Russian Youth. So this was one that I happened to find on Mubi and thought, I will catch that. So it's worth mentioning that this is a film by Alexander Zolotukhin, and he's quite a young director. He's younger than both of us, which is depressing.
Yeah, try not to think about
that. Yeah, never mind. The grim march of time and etc. Yes, so I think he was born in Ukraine, but studied film in the North Caucasus. And I think he was mentored by veteran Russian director Alexander Sokurov, who we've covered a couple of his films, which is promising, although Alexander Sokurov's films aren't always the easiest watch based on the couple that I've seen.
Which are those?
So that would be The Sun, which was like a Hirohito biopic, and then Russian Ark.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure I've heard of that one. I think I've heard of The Sun. I've not seen either.
Oh, so Russian Ark is the one where they go through the Hermitage Museum and it's all one take.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of going through history, more or less in a linear way, but it does jump around a bit. So yeah, that's the film. It's quite short. It's like just over 70 minutes, which is always nice. So, as a veteran of this podcast, Lyn, you'll remember, of course, what we say every time when we're launching into the film.
Yes. Payekali.
Yes, which means...
Here we go, and we're off. Let's go.
That's it. Okay, so 3, 2, 1.
Payekali.
Спасибо. Попробуем еще раз сначала.
Лёшка.
And we're back. Lyn and I have just watched Malchik Ruski, a Russian Youth, and before we tell you what we thought of the film, we're just going to have a quick plot summary from Lyn. So if you haven't searched it out and watched it yet and you're worried about spoilers, this is the time to pause the podcast, find the film, watch it, and then continue with the rest of the episode. So, spoiler warning out the way, and over to you, Lyn.
I feel like there's only going to be one major spoiler, and that happens right at the start.
Yeah.
I mean, just based on the trailer, which is that there's an orchestra for some reason.
There is.
I feel like that's the big thing. Is it the big thing? I don't know. Anyway.
I would say there's another really, really big thing, but that was also in some of the summaries that I read. I managed to somehow...
Oh, okay. I only saw the summary on Mubi, which was not that much of a spoiler.
I guess it wasn't.
Fairly vague.
But I still managed to not read it and just go, wham, hit play. I just did a physical, like I'm whamming a play button on an old video cassette, analog technology. So I managed to not even read that. I basically, I'd seen the trailer of this film, and that bit had somehow kind of passed me by, and the Mubi summary of the film did spell out this thing, but again, I hadn't seen it, so I was kind of like, oh, right, that is quite a turn-up for the books. But anyway, what is this big thing that we're alluding to, Lyn? I'm taking over your summary.
It starts with an orchestra, and then fades into grainy World War I footage. of trench warfare. And then there's a gas attack. And then our protagonist?
Yep.
Is he the protagonist? I guess I can't think of someone else that definitely is the protagonist, so let's say that he is.
I mean, unless you want to say that there's an abstract protagonist, and that is war, or music, or
youth.
Or youth.
Or something.
Yes. The platonic ideal of youth.
It's the platonic ideal of youth, yes.
It's the protagonist.
I guess. Yeah, so,
specifically Russian youth, but that's already getting into the specifics, so maybe it's not platonic and ideal anymore.
Well, we're
Who
about 30
knows?
seconds into the film. 2 minutes into the film. There's gas attack. Our protagonist, whose name is Alexei, but I don't think we find out for quite a long time. I might be wrong about that, and I just wasn't paying attention.
I think that is mentioned earlier on, but never mind.
So anyway, he kind of passes out and then wakes up in hospital, and it turns out he's gone blind because of the gas. And then he really wants to go back in the army and not get sent back home to his village. So a medic persuades his commanding officer that he should be allowed to stay in the army. So he stays in the army and becomes an air raid warning person.
How does that work in World War One, though?
So it's pre-radar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
quite
just
pre-radar.
Very pre-radar. So it's like a big horn. It's directional, so you can hear the planes coming. That's the idea, anyway. So you sit in a chair with like headphones, basically, heads, tunnels,
basically like rubberized tubes. It looks like
rubberized tubes. If you've been in an MRI machine, it's just like the headphones they give you in an MRI machine. Kind of, but connected to giant cones instead of a radio.
Big metal cones.
So he doesn't need to be able to see to do this because he can just move it around.
Right.
And then if he hears planes coming, he just like whams this big bit of metal to let everyone know that there's planes coming. It turns out that there are planes coming, and then he gets to go to a village with his mate Nevsky or something. Is that his name?
I didn't write it down. It's not quite Nevsky, but it is an N name.
Something like that. Anyway, so they go there, and then his mate starts flirting with some girls and gets pushed out by some officers. And then Alexei's wandering along, and then the priest is like, "You're blind, mate. Come and live in the church." I'm paraphrasing.
Also, I don't know if you spotted this, but the priest, so it was a Catholic priest.
Yeah. No, I didn't spot that. I just assumed that everyone was an Orthodox priest.
Well, this is I'm pretty sure...
Is that priestess?
Yes, Lyn is a priestess. You've been outed. No, I think what it was the rosary beads, and I don't think there's an Orthodox equivalent of that. So I could be wrong. Orthodox listeners, write in, correct me. Is this something that you have too? But so that was the other thing, and the other thing was that I am probably about 80-something% sure that the priest and the altar boy were speaking Polish.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't really clock that. I mean, I could barely hear anybody's dialogue anyway.
It is quite
I don't know if the mixing, because it's like the explosions were incredibly loud.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, you could barely hear what anybody was saying. I mean, we kept it at the whole volume during the film, so I don't know whether we could... I think that's because quite early on there was explosions, people were like, whoa, this is loud. And then just kind of turned it down for the explosions, then you can hear people talking a bit. So anyway, then they go back, then what happens? Oh, then there's another air raid, and Alexei goes deaf, because there's a bomb goes off right in front of the cones.
Yeah, and it basically basically totals them, yeah.
Yeah, so he survives, but he's deaf. And then the Germans show up and take everyone prisoner, and then he ends up back in the church, and this gets captured by this German guy, and then there's about 5 minutes of film left, and I cannot remember what happens. What happens at the end? Does it just pretty much end?
It pretty much ends. They're captured, and that's sort of it. And I think we have a few more cuts back to the orchestra.
Yeah, and it tells you what the pieces they were playing were. So this orchestra thing keeps fading in and out during the film. So they keep cutting occasionally to different members of the orchestra, in particular the conductor and the pianist. And they cut to other ones as well, but those are the two that they seem to come back to.
Yeah. And we should say, this orchestra is basically, it's modern day.
Yeah, it's modern day. 2018 or whatever this was filmed.
Yeah.
And it seems to be a youth orchestra. Most of the people seem to be, I would guess, late teens.
Yes.
There's a possibility somewhere in their early 20s. But just from the looks of them, that seemed to be, like, they were fairly young.
Yeah.
And was it me? This just might be because my hearing's a bit dodgy. But sometimes it seemed like the music that was playing in the film was not necessarily the music that the orchestra was playing. Or the orchestra that was playing music that didn't quite match the film. Or they kept flashing back to the orchestra and they were like practicing a piece that wasn't really a piece that matched the scene. Because at the start I thought like, oh, it's like this is a video of this orchestra that has been hired or whatever to play the music for the film.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear to me as to whether that was the case or whether they were just an orchestra that was rehearsing, well, two Rachmaninoff pieces as it turns out at the end. I don't know.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, is there any obvious connection between... It's not even the two halves of the film, because I would say almost like 90 to 95% of the visuals are World War One. But yeah, I very much got the same sense as you did of sometimes the music is quite apropos to what's going on screen, and then other times it's kind of like almost like they're just warming up or they're playing something that's kind of not that relevant.
Yeah, or they'd flash to the pianist and then you'd see him play notes and I was like, I can't hear a piano. And it's not like I have an amazing ear for orchestral music, I don't. So it could be that they were just playing really faintly in the background, and if you know about orchestral music, you could tell that. But I was like, I really can't hear a piano, and then maybe it will fade in gradually.
Yeah, I really don't know how I feel about I mean, I feel like it's judgmental to call it a gimmick, but it clearly sets the film apart from, you know, it puts this into the category of this is an experimental film rather than this is a conventional film, because it's even some of the juxtaposition with when you do cut back to seeing the modern day orchestra, like sometimes it will seem like something quite upsetting will happen and then you'll cut back to a member of the youth orchestra just looking quite sort of perplexed, and it's almost it's like your brain is trained by the language of film, having just from watching a lot of films over the years, to kind of think like, are they imagining? Are they remembering? You're kind of like your brain reads a connection between the image because it's one after another. At least mine did. Like there was one particular moment where this was really strong. I forget what it was that you saw in World War One, but it was something quite upsetting, and then it cut back to a young woman looking quite pensive, and it was kind of like it's almost like she's having like a flashback from another life almost. It was quite bizarre.
On a similar note, I wondered whether are they meant to be doing the music for the film? Like, imagine them. Sometimes they look up, and I'm like, they look at the conductor. Are they actually watching the film?
Yeah.
Like in the background, are they meant to be doing this, like accompanying? But then the other thing that they do that I hadn't talked about quite yet is that sometimes the conductor's voice from the orchestra like fades into the film.
Yeah.
During the World War One scenes. So he'll be like, "Oh, play that bar again" or something. So you get it. You kind of get it both ways. You get sort of cuts back to the orchestra, and you also get the sounds of not just of the instruments, but of the conductor.
Yeah, what's going on
like coming
in that
into
room.
the world one. Yeah.
Yes, and there's a lot more of that than there are of actually cutting back and seeing visuals from the orchestra time. Yeah, it's quite odd, and like my knee-jerk reaction is just to kind of like write it off as like pretentious twaddle. But at the same time, I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, it's certainly going to make the film stick in my head. I'm
not sure I know how I feel about it either.
A bold choice. A bold choice.
Because, and then I feel like I'm missing something, I don't know, because then I'm just, sorry, like you say, you're looking for connections in your brain, and you're like, oh, well, maybe it's a metaphor. And then the immediate metaphor is like, well, it's hard being in an orchestra, but it's not as hard as being in a war.
war.
And you're like, well, That seems accurate.
But also a tad like facile or however you pronounce
exactly.
that.
It seems just a little straightforward. I mean, maybe that is what the director was going for. I don't know, but
I mean, I feel like it's not a coincidence that it's a youth orchestra.
No, that seems connected, intentional, whatever.
Yeah, because you could have just had. I don't want to say for like full-grown adults, but like, you know, seasoned professional musicians.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be even more like, okay, I totally don't see the point. Whereas at least with the youth thing, you're kind of like, oh, okay, there's some kind of connection. Although they're older. I mean, how old would you even say Alexei was?
16? I don't know, maybe a little bit older.
I really struggled with it because I don't know what you felt like. His behaviour read as really quite young, almost like younger than 16, but like looks wise, yeah, maybe 16, 17.
Yeah, I don't know how old the actor is, or was, or whatever, but
yeah, no clue. But he did read quite young, and I don't know. Have you seen Ivan's Childhood, Tarkovsky film?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. You watch Tarkovsky films when I invite.
Yeah, I only watch Tarkovsky films with you.
Yes, and that was the one where I got someone else to talk about that one. So hi, Spencer. Sorry about that, Lyn.
That's okay. I'm only slightly offended.
We'll have to do like an alternate take one day.
Well, I'll just say exactly what Spencer said.
Yeah, it's an experimental podcast. Lyn just spends weeks memorizing the whole of Spencer's side of the conversation, and is just going to repeat those lines regardless of what I say. So we'd be pushing new podcast boundaries, but yeah. So the thing with Ivan's Childhood is that it's probably like a 12 or 13-year-old kid is the protagonist in that, and it's World War II as opposed to World War One. But he reads as really quite mature, and he seems to be really annoyed that people aren't taking him seriously because he's actually quite competent. Whereas Alexei in this, he's annoyed because people aren't taking him seriously, but also he is such a kid. At least that's how I felt about him. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, obviously, like, what happens to him is absolutely terrible, but at the beginning of the film, he just kind of annoys the heck out of everyone.
Yeah, he's obviously very, like, naive, and it's like, oh, it's your first day of the job, like, welcome to this trench.
Yeah.
Have a gun.
Yeah. Well, because we get a bit of them, like, moving up to the trench, and he's, admiring somebody's medals. And, like, apparently in all seriousness saying, like, how many Germans do you have to kill to get one of those? And the guy's like, oh, leave it. And then, like, a rocket comes over and he, like, dives for cover. And everyone else is kind of like, kid. Which is really kind of mean. But on the other hand...
Yeah, it's a little bit mean.
But, yeah, like, that's probably what I would do if a rocket came over, frankly.
That's fair.
You know, I'm... in my mid-30s, but yeah, it just means that his kind of attempt to like be laddish and fit in is scuppered like from the start. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how people relate to him, because like the guy, like the other guys in the ranks who are like in their 20s probably are kind of like annoying kids, whereas I think the older officers are a bit more understanding. At least that's the impression I got.
It feels that way, apart from that one guy that like beats him.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So how does that come about?
So he's blind but not yet deaf at this point, and this ties into a little bit about the Russian Revolution, which I'm going to guess this is set like 6 months or so before. That's the feeling I got from it, but I don't know enough about the history. So they're going for food. All the soldiers are going for food, and there's a big queue, and there's not that much food to go around. But the officers have already been fed, and so the soldiers kind of get Alexei fed. Because they're like, he's blind, give him some food. He can jump the queue. So he gets food, and then the soldiers kind of push him towards a table to sit down. But it turns out it's the officer's table. But he doesn't know this because he's blind. So he sits down at the table, and most of the officers are kind of tolerant of this and can see he's blind and he's not trying to, like, take the piss or whatever the military term is.
Yeah. Insubordination.
Yeah, insubordination, whatever. And but then the officer next to him is like, this is the officer's table, and the other officer's like, it's all right. But then this guy, who appears to be like their kind of immediate leader, so I guess he's lieutenant or whatever. Weirdly, I don't know the ranks of the Imperial Russian Army, so apologies, Imperial Russian Army historians that might be listening. So then this lieutenant or whatever insists on beating him for spilling his food over him and for sitting on the office table.
Like caning his hands.
Yeah,
like,
canes his hands, yeah.
Goodness knows how many times. Like, it's quite uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah, it goes on for, like, longer than you think it will.
Yeah, it's really, really horrible. So my theory about the setting is actually kind of the opposite. I think that it's right at the beginning of World War One, just because of the Polish setting. Because at that point, Poland was part of the Russian Empire. So essentially, it's like it's quote unquote Russian territory because they're the imperial force, but the Germans are like moving into it. Whereas I think later on in the war that the Russian army had been pushed back because it was just not a good war for them. So I don't know, because I think the Eastern Front, unlike the Western Front in World War One, kind of moved a lot more because there's just so much more space out there to move. But it was still very kind of futile, but it was just not quite as stagnant. So I thought of it as being like right at the beginning, but I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing that I accidentally considered, because I was confused, at the risk of becoming an IMDb pedant, I was like, those German helmets are like World War II helmets. I'm confused by this. So looked it up on Wikipedia. Wikipedia might be lying to me. They were introduced in 1916.
Yes, this is a good point, because they do look.
Because I was like,
very...
because I've learned history from TV shows. Sorry, my school history teachers. I was like, isn't everyone in Germany in those spiky hats?
Oh, the pickle helmet. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
In the First World War, I'm like, why are the Germans not wearing spiky hats?
Yeah, they're wearing the Stahlhelm, which was like the Wehrmacht.
Yeah, and then I was like, is this actually World War II? And I have got very, very confused.
No, you have not. But yes, that was the one thing that gave me like pause and made me think, okay, maybe this isn't 1914. Funnily enough, I just assumed like it was August 1914, like right at the beginning of the war. But to be honest, it could have been almost any summer of the war in a way. But I guess I just sort of like read a lot into it being in Poland.
Yeah, that makes sense.
World War One buffs.
Maybe it's one of those films where they weren't really going for like complete historical precision.
And I could be wrong because I've just watched it the once, but I don't think they didn't do any kind of like title card or like a date flashes up. There's no
I don't
like
think so.
August 1914 flash.
No, I think perhaps it's intentionally like vague about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he used like the word World War One footage earlier because I mean clearly it isn't, but it's very much meant to evoke that, I think.
Oh yeah, there were like moments, especially early on, when it feels a bit, almost as if it could be one of those sort of colorized, like the War in Color ITV documentaries.
Yeah, or even like if you spend too much time on Twitter, like I do, there's a lot of that happening, like that people are just going and colorizing things, which, is really interesting. It makes it feel a bit more real. I find a lot in a lot of cases.
I see what you mean, yeah, a bit more contemporary, I guess.
Yeah.
Plus people have a lot of their time on their hands at the moment.
They do. Yes. But yeah, as somebody who's into photography, I wondered whether you could talk a bit more about like the the visual choices that they made.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I don't know much about like film stocks. It was very grainy, especially the old footage, understandably. I don't know enough really to tell you by sight whether that was like digital and then messed with.
My instinct...
or whether it was actually filmed on film, and if so, what kind of grade. It felt like not 35mm fanciness. It felt like maybe it was shot on 16 or something.
Okay.
Like a little bit lower kind of resolution. But then the modern bits felt quite... Suddenly you lost a lot of the narrow focus, you lost a lot of the vignetting in the kind of modern orchestral shots. You still got the outer corners. So it was shot... I don't actually know what ratio it was.
Yeah, talk about those, because it was very much like rounded outer corners, like you will see on very old
Like it was
films.
narrower than 16:9, but it was wider than... What was old film? Was it 4:3?
Yeah, I want to say 4:3. Like
felt a bit more like 5:3.
Okay.
Like a bit wider than you think of kind of classic Hollywood film. Now, I don't know whether that was like a Soviet thing. I'm trying to remember a lot of the older kind of Russian films you've watched and whether they were a similar ratio.
Yes. My understanding is that generally speaking, like I don't know that widescreen ever really happened in the Soviet Union. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that nearly everything was 4:3 or a similar ratio. I'm like more scholarly people, please write in and correct me. But it's definitely nothing near like 16:9 ratio.
No.
So.
Or even like, it seemed wider than 3:2. 5:3 would be wider than 3:2, wouldn't it? I'm getting confused. I'm thinking 3:2 because it's quite a common, 35mm film is, like photography of film is 3:2. Obviously with movie film, it's narrower because you have the edge, you have the sound on the edge.
Yes, the corners kind of sets it as very like retro-y, just straight off.
It does, and then you're thinking like, oh, is this an artifact of the actual camera? In which case, are they using the same cameras? Are they using the same cameras for the modern orchestral setting, so you get exactly the same kind of border, but they're using different film stock? Or is it all being shot digitally and then all that's added afterwards?
Yeah.
'Cause there was quite a lot of variation in the grain in the past as well. Like, in most of the scenes, it was fairly consistent, but then when there was explosions or gas and a lot of dust, like the grain got worse. There was kind of dirt on the... I'm doing air quotes of film because I don't know what it was called. And like light leaks into the edge of the frame. But yeah, no, I would have been really like interested to hear how they shot it.
Yeah, my instinct was that it probably was digital just for budgetary reasons, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, especially as this was this guy's first film, I feel like it might have been quite difficult to get people to pay you money to spend a lot of time like fiddling around with expensive like vintage film stocks. Maybe that
would make sense. I guess
totally
you
speculating.
could put older lenses on it and get a lot of the visual. I mean, obviously that wouldn't give you the grain, but a lot of like the focus.
Okay.
That kind of like vignetting and sort of cloudier, narrower focus.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Who knows? It may well have all just been digital, and the original is totally clean and lovely.
Yeah, but it's very striking because it's almost like the graininess and the color palette is much more like, it's not quite sepia, but it's kind of like towards...
No, it's very desaturated.
Yeah, and quite sort of pastel colours compared to the orchestra scenes, which is much sharper. And because it's an orchestra, you've got lots of like blacks and whites and dark colours.
Yeah, it felt very much like a contemporary sort of, I don't know, like documentary. Like it could have been an orchestral documentary on BBC Four or something.
Yeah.
Like that kind of fairly... I don't know.
This is what professional musicians wear, and it just looks
this is what professional cinematographers or like, you know...
Smart.
It's all fine. It's like decent, and You know, it's not that exciting, like, visually, but...
But that's the point. You're not drawing attention to yourself.
No, apart from they kept the corners.
Yes. Yeah, that was kind of an interesting bit of continuity, I guess. Because I actually went back and checked, because I couldn't remember whether they did that. But yeah, it's just an odd film because of those choices. I mean, and the fact it was this director's first film, it's, you know, clearly very confident to make a film this way and convince somebody this is how I'm going to do it. I'm trying to think what else I want to talk about.
What did it mean, Ali? What did it mean?
War is hell.
Yeah, and so's Rachmaninoff. What's that film where they have to play Rachmaninoff? Shine.
Oh, okay.
Is that what it's called?
I have not seen that. I thought you were referencing The 7-Year Itch, where I
haven't seen that.
Oh, okay. Well, in the protagonist's, like, fantasy sequence, he can play Rachmaninoff, and Marilyn Monroe is incredibly turned on by this.
Okay. I don't know whether you were able to hear the laughter on the podcast.
Who knows? I mean, it's quite apropos that we've just got this sound and who knows where it's coming from.
Exactly, who knows where it's coming from? Who knows what's going on? Is someone having a party? Are there some quarantine-breaking parties going on in this block? Who knows? Anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny because there's not that much of it that's actually combat for a war movie, you know? It's not an action film.
No, it's not an action film, and it kind of feels like it might become one quite early on. Like there's the gas attack, and then the Germans start like crossing no man's land, and you think, oh, is there going to be a firefight? And then, you know, is this guy going to get killed, or people get captured, or...
Because it does look quite a desperate situation from the gas attack, because it's just
definitely
like taken out almost the whole unit, and those who haven't been taken out by the gas have been blown up by shells. We should say it's not a graphic movie, really.
No, not that there aren't any parts that are distressing.
No,
but it's really not. It's really not a graphic or a gory movie. I have no idea what the rating is, actually. But
that's a good question. Yeah, because I'm not sure if you see any blood. Actually, might be wrong. But
no, you see gas, you see the injuries to his eyes.
Yes.
But other than that...
But it's bandaged up.
It's bandaged, yeah, for most of it. And then, even in the little hospital tent, do you see other people's injuries, really?
That's a good point. You do see lots of people, like, lying on stretchers, but they never, like, zoom in on somebody's amputated leg or anything like that.
No, they don't.
Yeah, could have if you wanted to make that kind of a movie, but... Because, I mean, obviously, seeing, like, actual gory wounds is psychologically traumatic as well, clearly. But it's kind of like, the upsettingness is mostly sort of by implication, rather than stuff that you, the viewer, sees.
Yeah, I agree. And even when there's fighting near the end, when the Germans are shooting... And, like, someone gets hit, you don't really see it.
Yeah, he just kind of crumples into a pile.
And you hear a lot of... Yeah, same thing with the air raid. You see shells and you see explosions, but you don't see people getting hit.
Yes, this is not Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw
I'm trying
Ridge.
to find the BBFC rating for Russian youth. I regret Googling this. The BBFC has no results. The closest result is young Russian sluts.
Oh no.
So that's ruined my Google search history.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna lead to some odd predictions coming up. I would guess the rating for this would probably be a 12, but on the other hand...
I wouldn't shock me if it was a PG. Like, you could show it in a school, I reckon. In the secondary school, you could show it, and I don't think anyone would kick up a fuss.
You would get some tittering at certain points, though.
Oh yeah, there's dongs. We forgot about the dongs.
How could you forget the full frontal male nudity, Lyn?
Oh yeah, good point. It's probably an 18, isn't it? Because it has full frontal nudity in it. It's something... Oh, it might be a 15. But there's probably... I think there's some kind of cut-off where, like, if it has full nudity in it, then
Yeah, I think a lot of it would probably come down to context, and because, like...
It's definitely not sexual.
I mean, yeah, say that, but...
Well, I don't know.
the chap on the horse...
Okay, that was pretty sexy.
Dear listener who hasn't actually checked out the film, there is a point at which a Russian soldier is doing some very bareback riding.
Just when you thought this was a film you could watch with your children.
Right, there is... I mean, that I don't think you actually see...
No, there's a guy that jumps in the lake, isn't there?
Yes, and you see him from a bit of a distance, and you can definitely see something swinging around. But yeah, but yes,
it doesn't feel like it's definitely not like lingered upon.
No,
it's just, this is what people did.
Yeah, yes, because it's just they're all men being manly together, and that involves nudity apparently.
Yeah. I kind of forgot about it because it seemed like pretty inconsequential to the rest of the plot.
I'm just being really immature. I mean,
no, I understand what you mean.
But yeah, the guy on the horse, like he's clearly not wearing anything, so you just kind of see like pubes. But it's just like that's.
Why do we always see films with dongs?
Yes, because there was factual bathhouse wang in.
Oh yeah, that was factual wang. Was that in How I Ended the Summer?
It was, yeah. Like you briefly see the older chap in that.
That's right, you do.
But anyway, I feel like we've spent way more time than that probably deserves. But yes, content warning for that. Oh, but sorry, I'm lingering on the nudity, but we also get the first person who is the listening device operator.
Oh yeah.
We first stumble upon him, and he's not really putting his full attention to the job, or at least not the job his mind is supposed to be focusing on, because the officer and Alexei come across him, and he's just got some like nudie photos that he's just oh,
that's right, sexy boudoir photos of presumably his partner. I don't know, it wasn't clear.
I just kind of assumed that there were some sexy photos he'd bought somewhere.
One of them appeared to be signed, but I don't know whether that was a thing that people got like, oh, it was cool to get like signed photos from a dancer or something.
Yeah, that's sort of how it read to me.
This is pushing up the classification.
It is,
again.
Yeah, it is pushing up the classification.
I've downloaded the BBFC guidelines.
Okay.
Well, I'm doing this. Nudity with no sexual content is in principle acceptable at all classification levels, but will not generally occur more than occasionally in a U. Yeah. I don't know where we're going with that.
Yeah, it's good to know. But yeah, I definitely feel like the photos are nudity in a sexual context.
I feel like that's much more of a sexual context than the bloke jumping into the thing.
Yes, this is not like reproduction of like Botticelli's Venus or something. A little mini print. Because he's a very cultured young man.
Then the officer rips, or it might be the sergeant or something, rips up his pictures, doesn't he? Which seemed really harsh. That wasn't the same guy. No, that was a different guy to the guy that beat Alexei, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah. Well, I thought that was kind of funny, because he initially, like, yells at the guy, and then sort of, like, grabs them off him, and, like, is looking at them for a while, and then I think he decides, no, we can't have any of this, and tears them up. But it's kind of like, there's a considerable pause between, like, making the decision to rip them up and, like, seeing what they are.
There definitely is. I mean, he did seem to be distracted from his job by them.
Yes. Yeah, which kind of makes it slightly harder for this... Sorry. Makes it... Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, so this makes it slightly more difficult for... I like you just laughing at my strategic change of words. I'm going to have another go at that.
Keep all of this.
Yes, it's gold. Yes, so yes, slightly, yeah, it does make it slightly more difficult for this guy to argue that he should keep his job, considering he's not exactly giving it his full attention. But yeah, so he's replaced by Alexei, and yeah, I thought from the trailer that we were going to spend a lot of time with the listening device, and we really don't. I'm kind of glad that we don't, because in a sense it's like, well, yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah, it very much like serves its purpose of like, it's not really in the film for longer than you think.
Yeah.
There's just a few moments in the film where it feels like it could become a different film. You know, like we were saying with the trenches, you feel like, is this going to be, if not a whole action movie, is this going to be a lot of fighting and gore? There's that bit where you're like, oh, we're going to spend the rest of this film like just with the camera strapped to the warning system, and we're just going to like see it move around, and as he sits there for days and days and days until eventually there's a plane.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't do that.
You know, you feel like there's a lot of films that this could have become, like, segued into. And in the end, it kind of kept it simpler. Because, I mean, it's really short. It's, 74 minutes or something? And there's about 10 minutes of credits. Well, maybe not 10 minutes, but it's not that much more than an hour of actual film.
Yes, yeah. So it was quite refreshing to watch something that brief, but at the same time, it did feel very much like a film and not like a slightly long TV episode. Oh yeah,
agreed. It definitely felt like a complete. Well, I say that pretty much. Like, I could see how there could be another. I can see how it could be a longer film, I think, is what I mean. Not that it ever felt like, oh, this is really just a TV show. But I don't know how you would have ended it better, because the end is pretty abrupt. But I mean, what do? Do you have half an hour of them sitting around in a like German prisoner of war camp or something, and then like Alexei like runs into a guard and gets shot or something, or like sits there, or like everyone else goes and gets food and he doesn't or something? Like, I see what you mean. Like, I don't see what you would have said,
achieved,
when doing that.
Yeah, because you kind of get the point that this was like a pretty miserable experience to be involved with. I mean, it really highlights just kind of the technological difference between what the Russian army was working with and what the Germans were working with. Like, just down to, I feel so bad for the Russian soldiers at the point where the gas comes down and they've basically got like these cotton masks and goggles.
Yeah, they're not much more than like handkerchiefs and sunglasses, are they, really?
It's just like in a pouch, and you just kind of have to open it up and just, kind of put it on. And obviously because the German soldiers are using gas, and gas has a tendency to blow around places, they're wearing gas masks too, but it's very much like, this is clearly, we've prepared for this eventuality, rather than like the Russian army look like, okay, so they know gas has suddenly become a thing that they have to deal with, and this is kind of what they can do in a pinch, rather than something like that they knew they had to prepare for. Actually, to be honest, now that I think about it, I think just based on the use of gas means that it's probably later on in the war, like 15 or 16, because I don't think they were using gas from the off, so that might be the answer to that. But in some ways, maybe that doesn't matter in some sense. Like, this isn't meant to be like a literal depiction of an exact moment in World War One, and is more meant to be like just a general like evocation of that period.
That's how it felt. I mean, there weren't that many named characters. There wasn't, it didn't feel like it was trying to. I mean, it had a sense of place, but it didn't feel like it was trying to have a very specific sense of place. They don't really. I mean, like you said, there's bits of Polish or something, a mention of Poland, but it's not. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is, Gdansk, and it's the 27th of May, 1916, and the Germans are, 7.2 kilometers away, and you know what I mean. Like, it's not trying to. It's not like about a particular. I don't know whether it might be inspired by a particular real battle, but it didn't feel like they were trying to set it around a specific event. Certainly not an event that you'd expect the audience to be familiar with.
Yeah. I would definitely be interested. I mean, I'm always interested to hear like feedback from Russian listeners, just because World War One is just generally not at least to my mind, not a subject that comes up very often in Russian, like, popular culture and film and stuff like that, just because it was so awful and led to the revolution and the Civil War. So it's kind of like there's not a lot that kind of lends itself to, like, oh, let's make a story set in this time, you know, whereas, like, obviously World War II was horrific, but it's kind of like there's a lot to be said for, well, at least we won kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm probably expressing that extremely badly, but yeah, it's kind of like it's the war that gets focused on. Whereas obviously over here in the UK, there's a lot of time and thought goes into World War One related stuff in ways that I'm not necessarily always happy with.
I still feel like it gets less focused than World War II, though. I think perhaps because it's less black and white. I mean, I don't want to come across as saying, like, World War II was total good, because I don't believe that is true. But definitely, like, Nazism is terrible.
Kind of makes whoever's on the opposite side.
And you're like, sure, that is true.
Look better by comparison.
I'm happy to go on record saying Nazism is bad and should be opposed.
Good.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that controversial opinion?
No. I think this is a pretty avowedly anti-fascist podcast.
Okay, good. I'm glad that we've got that on record.
Yeah, it's taken up to like episode 40 odd to explicitly spell that out, but yeah, so, if anyone's been in doubt up to this point, we're.
But in a sort of broad way, I mean, without, you know, you can have a lot of World War II kind of media, I guess, and set it in a kind of quite broad way and be pretty uncontroversial.
Yeah.
And kind of know that largely the audience is going to be on your side, and it's quite clear as to be like, Nazis are bad, the people that are opposing Nazis are good, whatever side there happens to be, or whatever group of people that is.
Yeah.
Not that there haven't been more nuanced, like, examinations of World War II in media, but, like, I don't know, I think in World War One, it's just, I don't know, it was stupider. And...
yeah. It was a lot more, like, everyone kind of blundered accidentally into this, like,
yeah, everyone kind of blundered into this, and like everyone was kind of, you know what I mean, there wasn't such a, like, it's easy to say like, oh, the Germans are bad, but like they're kind of as bad as everyone else was. This is another oversimplification of World War One.
Yes.
It's just less dynamic, or even like if you want an action movie, it's less dynamic to having people sit in trenches and snipe at each other.
Yeah, well, basically, like, the way I tend to, again, totally oversimplifying, is that World War One seems like it was the most stupidly high-stakes game of chicken that was ever played.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like...
it's like, well, less. No, you back down. No, you back down. And it's like, oh, crap, like, millions of people are dead because nobody... it turns out, back down.
Yeah, which is kind of fascinating and horrific, but also less of an immediate basis for a pop action movie.
No, it's much harder just to go, oh, look, some guys in uniforms with swastikas all over them. We don't really need to...
skulls.
Yeah, we don't really need to spend too much time spelling out who's bad, although, you know, there seems to be plenty of people around in the present day who apparently didn't get the memo.
No.
That's one of those kind of like comforting certainties that you thought that you were just going to be able to
just comfortable enough with that, really.
Depend upon, is that, like, yes, there was always going to be like a tiny fringe of neo-Nazi weirdos, but you were pretty confident they were always going to just remain like a tiny, weird, horrible fringe that...
Yeah, it's one of those things, there are so many people in the world, there's always going to be a tiny fringe of whatever view, no matter how awful.
Yeah.
But whilst it remains a tiny fringe, it's just like,
yeah, it seems like it's less
and it's
tiny and less fringy than...
Yeah.
Ugh. Anyway, I don't know whether this will make it.
What is people's problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
People.
Maybe cut all this bit out.
Maybe. Right. Ironically, I think we've probably gone longer than the film. Which I know technically we've done that before, but this film's quite easy to do that with.
And it's quite easy to set with. I do feel like there's a fair amount that we rambled and could be cut.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a super long episode.
No. So maybe we should just kind of like round it off, because I think we've like covered bases in terms of plot and like style and all of that kind of thing. Would you recommend this to people? Do you think? I think
it's so short that it's kind of hard not to recommend that people watch it if they have just a passing interest in it. Some of the stuff we watch is like, or even that I watch, not for this podcast, just out of interest. It's kind of, it comes with a lot of caveats of being like, oh, if you're kind of interested in this, or like you have a long afternoon, and this is just like, I don't know. Did I enjoy it? I don't know whether I enjoyed it that much. I didn't dislike it, and I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I watched it because it was interesting and it left me thinking. I don't know. It's one of those films that like I'm glad I saw because I'm still thinking about it. And so obviously it made some impression on me. What I'm mostly thinking of is I'm not sure I got it.
Same.
If there was anything to get. But like I'm glad I saw it for that experience. And often there's films like that are 3 hours long or something. And it's kind of hard to recommend to other people unless they really care about it. But, oh, come on, it's like 70 minutes.
It's an hour and
like,
change.
It's not much longer than an episode of a lot of TV shows now. So, yeah, like, give it a go. Why not? Have a think about it. What does it mean? Let us know if you figure it out, please.
Yes, answers on a postcard.
A postcard with either a semi-nude bourgeois photo on the other side or a naked man on a horse.
Yeah. So yes, my thoughts on the film, similar to you. I think it's definitely a worth watch. I totally agree. I don't know if I understood what it was going for. I admired it for like doing its own thing, and I found it kind of interesting that something would as clearly sort of like disrupt the sort of suspension of disbelief of like a conventional film, you're just in the world, whereas this kind of like will yank you unceremoniously back to the present day and then like dunk you back in. But it's jarring, but it didn't stop me from like appreciating the film, I guess. It's weird. I didn't feel like I particularly cared about my suspension of disbelief. It was like in a Schrodinger's cat suspension of disbelief state, or whatever the Schrodinger's cat equivalent of that you could have for your. I'm probably going to cut this out as well because I don't think it even makes sense as an analogy. Podcast discipline.
Podcast discipline.
I mean, how did you find that the weird gimmick like messed with your experience, or?
I think it added a level of confusion, but I think it also kind of added a level of interest. I think had it just been an hour-long kind of World War One film, I guess I would have been like, that was interesting, I guess. Isn't war horrible?
Yeah.
But I think the way... I see what you mean, that it didn't... The way it was kind of interleaved didn't really feel like it was as intrusive as I would have expected it to be if you just described what was happening to me.
Definitely. I felt like it was some like grit in the oyster of my mind. It was kind of like there's something...
There's a great analogy.
Yeah. It's kind of like, this is kind of coarse and rough, like sand. It gets everywhere. Sorry, a little Star Wars Episode 2 allusion. Again, I'm losing it. I thought I was I thought it was brilliant podcasting for a minute, but no, totally ruined it by lack of comic judgment.
It's fine.
But yeah, I feel like there was, just because there was that something that was kind of like, what's this doing in here? Just like stopped my brain from going to sleep, even if it was like kind of a jarring thing. And I don't know if that's good, but it's an interesting technique as a filmmaker to just be like, hey, I'm going to prod you with this thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't a kind of sort of in dialogue with each other, but not in a way that was very clear.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't that direct, like, which would have been really jarring.
Sure.
But it wasn't that sort of direct thing where, like, oh, someone in the old bit, the 1916 bit or whatever, like, reacts explicitly to something that the conductor says. You know, which probably would have been taking it too far, but
it might
was,
have been, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Sure, watch it.
Yes.
It's short, and it's, if nothing else, worth your time to see an interesting bit of filmmaking.
Definitely. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Lyn, for joining me for this...
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Art house film.
Next time in person, I hope, but we will see what happens.
That would be lovely, yes. Before we disappear, is there anywhere on Tinternet that people wanting to get in touch can do that?
I'm on Twitter, I guess, occasionally, tweeting about not a lot. Reading people's tweets about video games and miniatures painting, and occasionally science education and pacifism.
Cool.
Those are really all of the topics.
So, I mean, did this film challenge your pacifism in any way? Did it give you a new appreciation for the art of war?
Yeah, it's not a great advertisement for, like, war, really.
No, it is not. Which is kind of as it should be.
So it's, but yeah.
So
it was interesting.
What's your handle for people looking for you on Twitter?
Oh, so it's SETCHKOPF, Setchkopf or something. Yeah, pretty sure that's what it is. But yes, I don't really say much of interest.
So tweet at Lyn with your interpretation of this movie.
Yes, please do. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
And your attitudes about the proper amount of dress or undress when riding horses.
Yes, and we should start a book taking bets on what the BBFC will eventually rate this film.
Yes, we should definitely do that.
I'm going to say PG.
Ooh.
I think that's lowballing it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 12, but I'm going to be shocked if it's more than a 12, because I do not think that was sexual dong.
Yeah, but then you've got the naughty bourgeois photos, and maybe those push it.
It's less sexy if it's black and white. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Is
that how ratings work?
It's classier though, so it depends. Depends what floats your boat. Oh, we're gonna have to cut this out too. This is meant to be a family. Well, I don't know. I mean, most of the episodes have the E sticker on them in case somebody says something rude. But anyway.
I feel like I listen to a lot of podcasts with a lot more swearing that don't have E stickers on them.
Yes,
that may be their problem with not labelling things correctly, but
it is that they are all reprehensible. And anyway, right. So yes, thank you very much, Lyn, for joining me once more.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. I do enjoy these.
Yeah.
Do enjoy doing these. That is a weirdly difficult sentence to say.
You enjoy coming along for the horseback ride. You did it again.
Cool back. And I mean, if nothing else, it gets me to watch films that I otherwise probably wouldn't have watched. And that is always a good thing. See more diverse art.
Yes, definitely. Great. Well, thank you again, and thank you very much for joining us, dear listener. And yes, das Vidania, folks.
Das Vidania.
So that's it for this episode, but before I go, I'd like to thank Sasha Ilukovic and the Highly Skilled Migrants for the use of their song Cold in our intro. You can find that song and the rest of their back catalogue on Bandcamp and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, please consider supporting us by leaving a rating at Apple Podcasts or at podchaser.com. That second one, Podchaser, even lets you rate individual episodes, so if this episode particularly stood out to you, you can let other listeners know that you enjoyed it. Recommending the show on social media is hugely helpful as well. If you can spare a moment or two to do that, it would really make my day. Thank you very much. Speaking of social media, please find us and say hi on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. You can also drop us a line at roosefalesunite@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, take care of yourselves, and bye for now. Okay, so a quick message before I go. If you're enjoying the Roosevales Unite movie podcast, there are a couple of ways you can help to cover the cost of running the show, if that's something you're able to do. The first option is donating roughly the price of a cup of coffee on our Ko-Fi page. The address for that is www.ko-fi.com/Roosevalesunite. Also, there is roosandsolve.com, that's RUSANDSOV.com, where you can get t-shirts, wall posters, coffee mugs and more with a Soviet and or Russian theme. If you use the promo code Roosevalesunite, that's all caps and all one word, at checkout, you'll get 10% off and they ship locally in the US, EU and Australia. Again, you'll find the links in the show notes. That's all from me. Take care and stay safe.